This is the first international research symposium that has been organized by the OBHR team over here at Jindal Global Business School, as titled People Management, Raising Key Issues. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sheldon Carvalho. I'm an assistant professor here in the OBHR area. The motivation that was driving, having this symposium over here. So one of the primary motivations of having this symposium was essentially to drive this research output that happens in the OBHR area, and maybe see if there are potential ideas that we can potentially explore together. A second, I would say, a more secondary goal in order to run this motivation was to maybe have some of these bridge knowledge opportunities. And what do I mean by that? It's basically the opportunity for you to advance knowledge where you try to bridge two unconnected areas of research.
So today I want to talk a bit about a new research. I call it the secret afterlife of feedback interventions, and it's about how people and organizations may learn from feedback sharing. We talk a lot about how people develop themselves and how they can learn, and everyone sort of recognizes feedback is hugely important. And if you talk to managers about how they give feedback, they're typically quite optimistic. And if you talk to our students in business schools and in MBA programs, they will typically say, yes, feedback giving, very important. And we learn them all sorts of strategies and tips and tricks to give feedback. And so the expectation is that feedback will be an easy process, and you help people develop, and the people will be very accepting and glad that they get any feedback. Now, if you look at what we see in our research and what happens in the reality, instead of this sort of process, what you often see is this sort of feedback process going entirely wrong. People say, well, yes, feedback is difficult, but we have a good process. It works because I've been doing this for 30 years, and 30 years of experience can't be wrong, right? And they would always refer to their performance management cycle, where you had performance ratings, and then you had performance reviews and a feedback discussion. And then often people would do goal setting, and after a year or a half year, managers would follow up with a new performance review cycle. And if you would talk to any HR manager, they would say that is how it should be. That is how it should be organized. And that all changed actually in 2015. So in 2015, you might notice that's the cover of the Harvard Business Review article in 2015 about reinventing performance rankings. And suddenly, a whole group of well-known companies like Microsoft and Dell and Deloitte and all Big Four companies, they all sort of came around the same time with this sort of message that we need to change how we deal with performance reviews, how we give feedback in our companies. Maybe we need to abandon performance reviews entirely. We need to stop doing all these ratings and rankings, and we need to move to a process that focuses more on informal feedback, and we need to give regular feedback to people in an informal way. These are like the three main themes that I've been doing research on. The first is, so if you give people regular feedback, how do people use that feedback? Are they able to understand the feedback, process it, digest it, and then sort of take the important and valuable bits of it and change their behavior to improve their performance, right? A second line of research is feedback seeking. As Sheldon explained already, we've done some research on what happens if people go out there and seek feedback themselves. So they do not need to wait till they get feedback from a supervisor, but they can go and approach that supervisor and ask for feedback, or they go to colleagues or a coach or mentors or other people in their environment, and they can seek feedback when they need it. And so under what conditions does this feedback seeking actually lead to improved performance? And who are the people who seek frequently feedback, and what sort of dilemmas do they encounter? And the third line of research is on how organizations can actually shape or design a work environment that is rich in feedback. So that means that people are no longer only dependent on a supervisor giving feedback, but actually that there's a lot of feedback around in the work environment that they can use to improve their performance. But the problem here is that we do not know a lot about feedback environments, because the way it's been conceptualized so far is typically that a rich feedback environment is seen as one where a supervisor gives a lot of regular and good quality feedback to employees. But that does not mean that that is necessarily a feedback rich work environment.
Great. Thank you for having me on this symposium. It's great and a nice opportunity for me to talk about my research, my more recent research on job challenge. Is the understanding that job challenge is critical for employees' work motivation, effective functioning, and growth. And research has indeed shown that job challenge is important for attracting, motivating, and retaining employees, job satisfaction, learning and development, work engagement, creativity, and career success. So it is important. But research on job challenge has also shown that some people shy away from challenging work. Some people experience unpleasant feelings when they are confronted with challenging work. And job challenge may not only lead to increased work engagement, but also to a greater exhaustion. Design research mainly uses Heckman and Alton's job characteristics model. And management development research mainly works with Macaulay and colleagues' job components model. And stress research nowadays mainly uses the challenge hindrance framework developed by Carvalho and others. And of note is that the job characteristics model challenge refers to the content or quality of work. In the job components model, challenge refers to the content or quality of work and dealing with people. And in the challenge hindrance model, challenge refers to the load or quantity of work. So there is quite a lack of concept clarity, and I would argue that unacknowledged variation in conceptualizations may mask differential effects of types of job challenge. And this could lead to a substantial misinterpretation of study results and ill advice for practice. To address this lack of concept clarity, I set out to integrate these views on job challenge. We found three broad categories of challenges. Challenges related to people, the self and other people. Challenges related to tasks, the content and the load of work. And challenges related to the situation, internal and external to the organization. The three most frequently mentioned challenges related to the content or quality of work are high responsibility, including high impact, high stake, high risk, high responsibility. Novelty, including doing a task or dealing with a situation for the first time. And cognitive complexity, which entails dealing with many task components, not knowing what to do, or a high level of cognitive processing. The three most frequently challenges related to the load or the quantity of work were a high volume of work, such as dealing with high workload or working on a large-scale project. Time pressure, which would entail working on a high pace and deadlines, dealing with urgency, and working long hours.
So I'll be presenting today, as mentioned, on this topic, which is called challenging job experiences. As I mentioned, the title is taken specifically. The big motivation for it was Professor Irene's paper in 2009. So obviously there are these several terms that are used in the literature, but they essentially are focused on these experiences being challenging in nature. So let me speak specifically about that conceptualization of these experiences. So what are challenging job experiences? These are essentially features within individual jobs that provide individuals an opportunity and a motivation to learn. They sort of put into situations that are ambiguous in nature. So for example, you work on a specific experience where you have something like a major change in your work role that happens. In these experiences also you have an opportunity where you work with people who come in with different value systems, who tend to have very different opinions than what you would have. So for example, Let's say you're part of the management team and you need to sort of negotiate, a wage agreement with the labor union. Or let's say you've been put in on a joint venture project, so you're part of the company team, and you're essentially working with a joint venture partner who's essentially from a different country altogether, right? So there could be those certain differences that sort of really show up. So what are organizations trying to do in order to get you into these experiences? What is the ultimate aim out of it? The key reason why organizations put individuals through these experiences is to sort of really give them a taste of what they are going to experience in the future, right? So what are they going to really encounter in most leadership jobs? In this paper, what we sort of look at is we essentially say that, well, these challenging experiences, they tend to pull you out of your normal day-to-day responsibilities. In other words, these experiences involve some sort of new activities that you engage in. And these experiences also tend to involve you into some connections that you sort of start building with senior leaders in the organization. In other words, these experiences try to help you build new relationships. Now, these various conditions, what they essentially do is this start slowly moving you out of your current work identity, that is how you currently see yourself, and they make your possible selves, or your more specifically your future work selves, more salient. Now, given that you have a more salient oriented future identity, you have some clear image of what you want to be in the future, you are more likely to undertake something like proactive behaviors which are more future oriented in nature, in order to sort of assert or try out your future work selves as such. So overall, bringing this identity lens to this literature on challenging experiences, we were able to sort of account for certain positive outcomes that were still not explained by the existing literature. Most notably, these proactive behaviors such as strategic scanning and taking charge, which have a very important role to play in order to improve the future of the organization. We essentially draw on this Ibarra's perspective on the identity-based leadership development. And what does Ibarra argue in the paper? He essentially says that, well, you want to understand how people develop, well, you need to look at it as an identity transition or an identity shift that people make when they sort of move out of how, like I mentioned, out of your current identity, that is how you currently see yourself, and you allow for yourself some creation of possible selves in the future. That is, you start thinking about what you hope to be or what you aspire to be in the future.
The research I'm going to talk about is the effect of change agents leadership style on successful ERP implementation and organizational performance, evidence from UAE. The idea actually behind this is came from the fact that like there are two really important aspects which we studied in OB. First is change management, and second is ERP nowadays, right? And the idea is here that like obviously the individual contribution of leadership style on firm performance, and also ERP on the performance of organization is studied a lot. Right. So we were of the view that how we can create a model which can connect these two things together. And although change management is studied a lot, but then contribution of change agent is really limited. How change agent like interacts with the environment. And when you talk about change agent, it is internal as well as external change agent. So how they interact with the environment of the organization and create something which is relevant and also positive in terms of organizational performance. So why we taken UAE as a like first we talk about change management, right? Change management, talking especially about the incremental change here, which is more planned in nature here, which is more organizational driven. And when the change agent is introduced in the organization, what are the various initiatives take place? And one of those initiatives, and which is nowadays much in demand, is ERP implementation. One of the niche where lot many consulting firms like SAP and Oracle comes in the picture focus our attention on this subject, how role of consultants, how role of change agent, external and internal, is influencing ERP, and then how it is leading to organizational performance. In broadly, this piece of work talks about the role of leadership style of change agents and how it impacts ERP and also organizational performance. And the three hypotheses which were there in our paper are basically change agents leadership style as a positive influence on ERP implementation as a positive influence on firm performance, and third hypothesis was ERP implementation success mediates the relationship between change agents leadership style and firm performance. Surprisingly, all the three types of leadership styles has positive influence on also on ERP as well as on the firm performance.
I think we all hate stressful days in our lives. I too have had many such days in my student life as well as in my work life. As a student, I was afraid of annual exams. It was not because I was a poor performer. It was because, I used to think, would I be able to remember everything that I've learned over a period of an year in a 1 to 2 hour exam? Or sometimes I used to think, are these questions really measuring up what I have learned? But the stress started increasing when I reached my high schools and in college. The main reason was that I was constantly reminded that these academic scores are going to decide my future. And we know that, I think, particularly in India, and I'm sure maybe in the rest of the world also, it's true that your academic scores is considered to be a benchmark to identify your future potential. Yeah, and I continue to hate exam even after I became a topper in my master's degree exams, and also I was able to successfully complete my PhD from one of the top business schools in India. Now, to cut the long story short, I thought I was free from the stress of exams when I became a teacher. Rather, I thought now I could be on the other side of the table and give stress to my students. But it lasted only till my first annual performance review at work started. And since then, the performance appraisal had taken the seat of annual exams. And again, this was not because I was a poor performer, but I felt that those 10 to 15 minutes performance reviews were not doing any justice to my performance of the entire year. And what do? When you have bad reviews? You would walk out of the interview room, and then you come out, start searching for new jobs, isn't it? What if that doesn't work? You may think that, okay, from today onwards, I'm going to prepare for a great performance review next year. Again, in my case, that didn't work. In the extra preparation didn't work me as well. So to manage this frustration, I decided to start reading, teaching, and writing on performance management. And interestingly, it has become one of my research interests. Now, so today I'm going to present some of the key aspects of the Middle Eastern performance management that I drew from a bunch of different papers in the literature, which I reviewed as part of writing a book chapter. So this is going to be a fairly theoretical one. However, let me tell you, there is a lot of scope on any area of HR research in the UAE. So this is a call for research, because we know, in the Western world, many of these areas like performance management or learning and development, etc., is in a mature stage. We could see a lot of meta-analyses coming about all these topics. But whereas when it comes to the Middle East, even after, because I reviewed the literature as part of writing a book chapter. And I found it really, there is very, very little literature available. And that probably brings us to an opportunity that we could study a lot of these listed areas which could be the impact of transformational leadership on employee performance.
Mine is a kind of generic paper. This is coming from a research paper which is recently accepted in employee relation. And very recently, we, along with few of my colleagues, it's a multinational team, we started exploring issues related to grand challenges, how to tackle grand challenges. So as I mentioned, in this grand challenge research, majority extant literature, it comes from public policy, climate change, or not for profit sector, social entrepreneurship, and all these kind of area. So we identified a gap, we found a gap, and we collated few papers. Yes, there is some research on that, and then we started answering the question how to address those big challenges. And suddenly, when we reviewed that relevant literature, it came to, I mean, what surfaces various types of innovation. So I'm not going to talk about that research piece, but during that period, this COVID pandemic, it hit, we got hit, and majority of your businesses, they got a hit. So we started talking about contextualization of our research also. And we saw there is a great opportunity if we could talk about this innovation in an emerging market context, and that too in a small and medium kind of enterprise context. This paper is very simple. We say, can we manage people and can we help them in encouraging or displaying the required behavior? This is what we teach in our human resource management classes. The only hypothesis we tested here is on basis of human resource practices in a SME context, can we motivate people to display some behavior which is desired? And in present context, that desired behavior is innovative work behavior. So yes, we talk about that desired workplace behavior. It goes from your employee engagement, organizational commitment, flexibility, innovative behavior, right? Intention to stay back. So why people they are addressing all these kind of issues? Because ultimately it adds value to an organization. And this goes back to the concept of value creation. So a lot of literature says innovative work behavior of people, it adds to organizational sustainability and competitiveness. So following this assumption, we designed this research. Yes, by creating a system, by creating a climate and culture, and where our human resource management practices, you say strategic human resource management practices or HR system, whatever you may call it, but for me, all are very similar for the sake of making this presentation. And our data says, yes, certain HR practices, they promote innovative workplace behavior, which further leads to value addition and organizational sustainability. So when I say HR practices, yes, we know all, I mean, starting from HR planning, recruitment and selection, performance appraisal, career, succession, training and development, employee well-being, and all that. There is a conception like what is relevant or what is valid in for-profit and big organizations context may not be valid or may not stand true in case of small and medium enterprises.